How's it going, everyone? I'm Keegs, and today we're going to be talking about issues 1 through 3 of the Green Lantern 2005 run. Now, this is going to take place right after the Hal Jordan Turn to Parallax story that we covered in my previous video, and that went through the Rebirth arc as well. So we're just jumping right into the 2005 run of Green Lantern. This story starts off with the flashback, actually, to when Hal first acquired his power ring. He had punched a senior officer and gotten himself kicked out of the Air Force and barred himself from flying anywhere at all, and the only person that would actually hire him was Carol Ferris. Except Hal couldn't fly there either. He was just allowed to perform maintenance on the planes, but hey, at least he'd be around something flying, so he ends up taking the job. While working on a plane one day, Abin Sur, Green Lantern of Space Sector 2814, crashes on Earth, and the ring seeks out Hal, bringing him to Abin, and Hal accepts the responsibility of becoming a Green Lantern. It's interesting to me since I don't know that I've ever seen a ring seek someone out and bring them to meet their predecessor before the predecessor actually dies. We'll find out later why this was actually the case, but I think Hal may have actually been the first one to have their ring fly them to their predecessor before they die. Flash forward to present day and it shows Hal flying again. Though he's not actually gotten a job back as a pilot, his old friend Shane Sellers pulled a few strings to let him fly just this one time. Hal pretty much begs at this point to be allowed to be a pilot again, and he'll do whatever it takes, but Shane just kind of brushes him off and says he doesn't really have the authority to pull that off. Hal goes back and sees that Green Lantern John Stewart is contacting him, saying that he's found an abandoned spacecraft that needs their immediate attention, so Hal takes off for the skies. They come across a yellow ship, which is basically just to show the audience that simply the color yellow is no longer enough to neutralize a Green Lantern's power. Since Parallax was freed from the central power battery, if the Lanterns focus hard enough on overcoming their fears, the power rings will be effective to anything colored yellow now. Once they get inside of the ship, they realize it's empty, and since the fuel cells are depleted, they know whoever was in this was on a one-way flight. With no other clues to who this ship actually belongs to, Hal heads back to Coast City, which is now being rebuilt since it was destroyed by Cyborg Superman. But there's literally no one there anymore. It does make a bit of sense why nobody would want to come back to the city though, because they are probably a little bit scared since the last 7 million people to live there died there. Hal's brother Jim meets him at his old apartment, and while Hal is trying to convince his brother to move back to Coast City, a jet comes barreling down on fire, and Hal manages to suit up as Green Lantern and at the last second save the plane from crashing. When the pilot gets out, Hal immediately notices it's his only weakness, an attractive girl who tells him that her name is Jillian Perlman, aka Cowgirl. But before they get to talking, they notice that the jet engine from the jet that she was just flying certainly isn't from Earth. At the same time this is all happening, at a local restaurant in California, a strange man walks into a diner. Sounds like the beginning of a joke, but nope, he mercilessly just starts killing all these people, saying his primary directive is to terminate all life. If you're familiar with Green Lantern, you probably already guessed it, it's a manhunter. And this robot is just tearing through these people, killing everyone in sight while headed to Edwards Air Force Base, which also happens to be the base that Hal is currently at. Hal and Cowgirl are investigating the jet engine and realize that it's alien technology, but it's been reverse engineered by humans to fit inside of an Earth aircraft, when all of a sudden General Stone pulls up and introduces himself to Green Lantern. Ironically, this is actually the same person that Hal had punched to get himself expelled from the Air Force, but now this guy has moved so far up in the chain that Hal would literally require this guy's approval to get back in if he wanted to. And he does want to, so he goes to talk to Shane about getting a meeting with Stone when his ring immediately picks up an extraterrestrial life form nearby and a truck explodes, revealing an old, broken, but iconic Manhunter. Hal fights with this Manhunter until he smashes through the wall of a building and finds himself in a top-secret lab, where he finds his predecessor Abin Sur's ship, which has clearly been broken down and studied by the scientists here. While looking at the ship though, the Manhunter grabs a hold of Hal when out of nowhere, the Manhunter's arm gets lasered off by the new and improved Manhunter 2.0. In a weird twist, the old Manhunter and Hal team up for a split second just to lay into Manhunter 2.0. You know, actually I'm just gonna call him M2 for short. But M2 realizes that the ring is the source of Hal's power, but it's protected by a shield being produced from his hand. So he literally opens up his face and starts sucking out the power from the ring, draining its battery. Luckily for Hal though, the old Manhunter tries to escape at that moment, and M2's primary objective is to destroy the old Manhunter, so basically he just leaves Hal to go after the broken Manhunter. With no power left in his ring, he asks General Stone for a jet, which the General just replies, "Sorry, this is classified, we can handle it from here." Which is when Hal just completely decks him in the exact same manner he did when he wanted to get ejected from the Air Force originally. Although Stone is pissed at that, Shane steps up and vouches for him, and General Stone ultimately agrees to let him use a plane. Like, I get it, it's Green Lantern, but you just let that dude fly off with a multi-million-dollar plane. If that thing gets destroyed, you are going to be in some deep trouble as a general, I'd imagine. But while Hal is flying, he asks the general where that thing came from, and Stone responds that it was supposed to be classified and no military to get their hands on that kind of technology, but after the Lanterns had destroyed all of the Manhunters originally, Stone actually found one in a swamp, and they decided to keep it a bit of a secret because they know it was completely broken and couldn't be activated again, right? But for some reason, of course, 7 weeks ago, the thing powered back up randomly. Just then though, Hal catches up with the fighting Manhunters and fires some missiles into them, but M2 jumps on the plane, ripping off the windshield, and the engine just goes up in flames. Well, better start on that paperwork, General Stone, since you just lost a few $1,000,000 there. But Hal reveals that even though he looks like he's in a pretty bad situation, with M2 ripping him out of the plane and all, he actually does still have a plan. M2 turns around and destroys the old Manhunter, and then turns back around to Jordan, but at the same time his faceplate gets knocked off by some falling debris, and in one of the coolest moments, Hal jumps out of the destroyed plane and starts to recite the oath mid-air. When he then directly lands on M2 and powers up his ring through M2's face, ripping his head off in the process. M2 starts a self-destruct process, but just before it explodes, it says it feels something, to which Hal tells him that he's feeling fear. The next day, Hal is talking to John Stewart and tells him that he's gonna let the Guardians know that the Manhunters are back, though John thinks that if they really are back, then the Guardians should really already know that. Hal walks into an office though, where he sees Cowgirl talking to the receptionist, where she says she's fine to get back into the air, but bumps into Hal and says that it'll be good to have some competition. Hal is a little confused at first, but when he gets into the office of General Stone, Stone says that Shane put a request in for him to be reinstated, even willing to go through the beginner classes again. Hal apologizes for punching him 15 years ago and getting kicked out of the Air Force, and Stone replies that that's really all he needed to hear, and throws in one last line saying it's an honor to have a Green Lantern on the force, surprising Hal that the General knows his secret identity. But the General says he's actually only been punched twice in the last 15 years, and as soon as Hal punched him as the Green Lantern, it all made sense. With this though, Hal was once again an Air Force pilot. That evening though, he goes back to his apartment and starts contemplating if fear is actually what controls the universe, when all of a sudden he sees a car coming. It's his brother who has returned with his family to start their life again in Coast City. Epilogue. The artificial planet Biot. Manhunters walk with a mysteriously cloaked man, codename Grandmaster. He tells the Manhunters that he doesn't lack the personal investment of their previous makers, and that they need the Green Lantern Corps to form once again for some diabolical purpose. This is when it pans to a group of Green Lanterns strung up like they're being drained of their power. And if you know the Parallax story, you immediately recognize these to be the exact lanterns that Hal tore through on his quest to obtain the power of the Guardians, previously presumed dead. So that's going to wrap up the first small villain arc and really set up Hal Jordan as Green Lantern again, which I think is a pretty good place to stop. And they left us some good breadcrumbs if you know where the story's going, and there's some clues and hints in there. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you all next time to continue Hal's journey as Green Lantern.